Rent today at $1,000 in Austin will be $10,000 a month 30 years from now.
Trump just won the election in a landslide due to his economic policy. But it's not all perfect, and home buyers are about to feel that.
The federal government is going to change its approach to homelessness under the Trump administration, and at the top of the list is housing first.
So by now, I think everybody's got a pretty good handle on the fact that when Donald Trump becomes president and he enacts his horrible policies of mass deportations and tariffs on everybody he can think of, the cost of the everyday goods that you purchase are going to go through the roof.
As Donald Trump has won the presidency, homes have immediately become more expensive and less in reach for average American citizens.
Trump just won the election in a landslide due to his economic policy. But it's not all perfect, and home buyers are about to feel that. Don't believe me? Look at the stocks of home builders getting absolutely smoked as the market massively rallies today. Here's the double whammy home buyers are about to face. First, Trump's economic policy. You get a tax break, I get a tax break, everybody tax break. It's inflationary. When inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up. We just watched the COVID inflation take mortgage rates from 3 to 8% like that. And two, what do we so desperately need for home prices to come down? More homes. And what's the number one input cost to build a home? Workers. And currently 30% of construction workers are immigrants. Trump's policy will reduce immigration, equaling higher labor costs, which leads to higher home prices. I'm not a hater. I just did a video on the positive of Trump's policies. But if you ask me the negative, it's inflationary. And home buyers are getting the double whammy with policy that leads to higher mortgage rates and higher home prices. Hit the follow, guys. I will give you an unbiased view to make you financially smarter every single day.
Trump's presidency could have a significant impact on mortgage rates and rent. His economic policies such as tax cuts and tariffs are expected to boost inflation and interest rates.
Guys, serious question. How are people affording to exist? I live in Vegas. It's supposed to be cheap here, but what the hell is going on? So when I first moved here to this apartment in 2021, rent was $1,300. It's now $1,800 and going up. You know what's even crazier? Vegas does not have rent stabilization. People talk all the time about not being able to afford places like New York, LA, but Vegas, bro, Vegas is supposed to be cheap. This is why we need to be present in local policies and politics, because those are the people that determine these things, like affordable housing and rent prices moving forward.
Hey, U.S. government here. So here's the situation. So our population is dipping below the replacement level, and as the U.S. government, we can't have that. So your responsibility now is to have children for us. Okay, yeah, no, not a problem. So I just have a couple questions. For one, are you going to help with the housing market crisis that's going on right now? Because a lot of my generation cannot afford a $400,000 house. No. Okay, how about putting a cap on rent? Because $1,500 for rent is severely out of budget. No. Okay, what about helping with medical bills? Because, you know, going to all those prenatal appointments and then actually giving birth and then the baby's appointments, like, medical bills are just so expensive and so hard to keep up with. So can you guys help out with that? No. Alright, could you guys remove the abortion law? Because what if there's that slim chance I get pregnant and it becomes ectopic and then they won't do a life-saving procedure on me because the baby has a life? No, we're not removing that. Alright, what about the cost of formula? Because I know there are a lot of mothers out there who just can't breastfeed, and then having to buy a container to 2 containers a week of formula is just, it's super expensive. Yeah, we can't help with that, sorry. Alright. What about gas prices? Like, I know in a lot of states, like my state, gas is $4 a gallon. So, like, driving around all these doctor's appointments and going to work, like, can we help with that? No. Oh. since you guys aren't willing to lower the cost of the things I've listed, are you able to help raise my wages so I can afford these items? No. Alright, so let me get this straight. You won't help with housing, you won't put a cap on rent, you refuse to help with medical bills, you won't remove the abortion law that actually makes it super unsafe to have a child, you won't help lower the cost of groceries or gas or formula. So what are you guys actually gonna do to help us have kids? Nothing? You just need to stop being lazy, get your ass into work, and get it together and have a kid so we can fix this population problem. How's that sound? No.
Rent is so expensive that minimum wage workers need 3 roommates or 4 jobs to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. In fact, there's not a single state in America where a minimum wage worker that's full-time can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So look at this for example. If you live in Alabama where the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, you'd have to work 90 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom. Now you would need to work 74 hours a week to afford the average 1-bedroom apartment in Alabama at the minimum wage. So someone explain to me why we're pretending that workers are the problem when it's the corporations that are arbitrarily pushing up prices on rent, food, laying off workers, all to maximize their profits. Like, how is this system that we're currently living in sustainable?
Hey, Bessie. So now that Trump is elected, we're about to head into a recession. So just buckle up, and here's what you need to know. And if you guys are new here, I'm Theonie the Lender. I've been a lender for 9 years now, and I help people every single day buy and refinance a house. Okay, so here's what's been going on. The last couple of months have been absolutely insanity with these mortgage rates. They were literally at the lowest level that we've seen in 2 years back in August, and then they spiked right back into the 7s a couple weeks ago. So what's been happening is that there's all these data reports that are coming out showing a really strong economy, and the stronger the economy, the higher these rates go. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, like, Theonie, what freaking strong economy? And I'm with you on that. There are people that are making the most amount of money that they have ever made and still cannot buy groceries and are still just living paycheck to paycheck. And the idea of buying a house to them is like so far out of reach. So here's what's about to happen. All these reports that have been coming out showing a really strong economy, I think it's because we were in election year. And so every report that was coming out was trying to showcase a better economy than it really was. For example, the jobs report a couple months back showed that we added so many jobs, but they didn't account that most of those jobs were part-time jobs. They were in addition to people's full-time jobs. However, the economists only saw this as, oh, we added more jobs, so now we have a super strong economy. We're about to see reports come out showing the actual levels of unemployment. And as these things get worse, as unemployment rises and people start to lose their jobs and the economy does actually weaken because it is not as strong as it's depicted, the interest rates will go back down for housing. And now that Trump has entered office, they're going to try to blame it on him, and they're going to full on focus on this terrible, bad economy and this huge recession that we've already been in, but nobody's said that yet. They're going to highlight that, making the mortgage rates drop. So this is good news if you are in the market to buy a house in the next 12 to 24 months. But things are going to get worse and sound a lot worse because the real reports were making it seem like we were in a stronger economy than we really were. So if you're looking to buy a house in the next 12 months, this is a very crucial time to get ready and just make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, because once those rates start dropping again, there's going to be so many more people that can afford that same house that you're looking at today at no competition. You're going to have competition, which is going to drive the housing prices right back up. And I am accepting new clients for next year, so head over to the link in my bio to get started and follow me along for more mortgage tips.
So by now, I think everybody's got a pretty good handle on the fact that when Donald Trump becomes president and he enacts his horrible policies of mass deportations and tariffs on everybody he can think of, the cost of the everyday goods that you purchase are going to go through the roof. Again, just the mass deportation would cause your prices to go through the roof, but you add that to the tariff plan, we're looking at a massive sudden price increase across the board. In fact, retailers have already been holding their quarterly calls, strategizing on how to raise prices. So this is not a pie in the sky. This is not a hypothetical, maybe it will, maybe it won't. They've already got it planned. It is going to happen. So we know that. here's what you may not know. You may think that, okay, well, the things I've already purchased, obviously, I'm not gonna have to pay more for what I already own, right? Oh, if only it were that simple. Because the mass deportations and the tariffs on everybody are not the only plans that Donald Trump has. And in fact, his deregulation platform that Republicans always run on would cause the cost of your mortgage to increase by up to about $3,000 per year if, and only if, of course, you're a middle to low income earner. So if you make a lot of money, you don't have to worry, your mortgage is locked in. But if you're somebody that had to basically get a government subsidized loan through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, Trump's plans would cause your mortgage costs to increase by up to $3,000 per year. Here's what's happening. Following the economic crash of 2007 and 2008, which of course coincided with the housing market collapse, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were basically put under a government conservatorship. And because of that, the government is essentially backing these loans from these two financial giants. And they do provide loans mostly to lower to middle income American citizens. And in order to not take on the full risk of these loans, but being backed by the government, they're then able to kind of bundle them and they sell them to investors, which helps to keep the mortgage rates low. Trump's privatization plan, and I hope, by the way, that I explain that in a way that makes sense, because it is a very complicated issue, and I tried to distill it down to one paragraph. So a little tough to do, but that is basically it in a nutshell. So anyway, Trump's privatization plan, or his deregulation plan, I should call it, calls for the privatization of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, something Republicans have been pushing for years. Trump wanted to do it in his first term, but he was unsuccessful in doing that. He will attempt to do it again in a second term, and now with Republicans in the House and Senate, probably going to be able to do it. And if he does that, and he privatizes these government-backed entities, suddenly that frees them up to increase your interest rates. But more importantly, even if they don't do that, what it does is it removes the government backing from these mortgages. Meaning, those investors who are essentially the ones really backing it, in front of the federal government, suddenly your investment is far riskier. When it's a riskier investment, fewer people are willing to make the investment, which at that point would cause these rates to go up because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would need to make sure that they can get their money out of it before these people default. Again, it's a very complicated thing, but economists are predicting that if this happens, it will raise your prices by about $3,000 per year. So again, it's not just your eggs that are going to become more expensive, or your milk, or your gas, or even the cost of a new house. Even if you're already locked in with an existing mortgage, if it's through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you may want to start saving now, because Trump's about to...
As Donald Trump has won the presidency, homes have immediately become more expensive and less in reach for average American citizens. And that is because mortgage rates are on the rise. And I will now explain how and why that is happening in a totally non-political way. Now, the reason why homes have become more expensive is because mortgage rates are on the rise. In fact, immediately after Trump winning the election, mortgage rates increased from 6.72% to 6.79%. In fact, mortgage rates have been on the rise since September 26, when they were at 6.08% for a 30-year mortgage and 5.16% for a 15-year mortgage, and have been on the rise as it started to look more and more likely that Trump was going to win. But what does Trump have to do with mortgage rates? Isn't this more so affected by interest rates at the Fed? And the Fed have been cutting interest rates. In fact, they've cut it by 0.75% this year so far. Shouldn't that mean mortgage rates should also be coming down? And the answer is no, because mortgage rates are forward-looking towards expected inflationary pressure, and three key policies that Trump ran on are all inflationary: tax cuts, tariffs, and deportation. Now, I just made a video talking about how and why tariffs cause inflation. Now, if you import in goods, tariffs are actually an import tax put on the U.S. company. But it's not like they cover that whole thing. They push the costs onto the U.S. consumer. But if we even move everything within America, we cannot meet our own consumption demands, even if we produce as much as raw materials as we possibly can to try to meet that consumption. We will have to import in goods that get hit with that tariff that push on costs to U.S. citizens. And if more U.S. citizens are part of the labor force making our goods, U.S. citizens require much higher salaries, and those costs are much more expensive than any shipping costs you're saving on, and they ultimately as well get pushed on to the end consumers, making things more expensive and increasing inflation. Trump's policy of tax cuts is also inflationary. And the reason why is these are very large tax cuts for corporations as well as for very wealthy people. Now, you might say, oh, if corporations getting taxed less, their profit margins are going to be even better. There's not going to be a need to increase the price of goods. Correct. In fact, they're going to hire more people as well, potentially, and job market could do very, very well. That all does and sounds and feels really, really good. But the thing is if more people have high-paying jobs, more people have more money. If more people have more money, and if more people are being taxed less, they also have more money, they spend more. If you spend more, demand goes up. If demand goes up, so too do the price of goods and therefore inflation. Now let's talk about deportations, because you might immediately be like, how the hell did deportations increase inflation? What do they have to do with it? In fact, if you're actually removing people from America, aren't there less people to buy things, which means demand actually comes down and inflation would come down? That is an effect. However, the effect of increased labor costs, because cheap labor from immigration, especially for things like picking crops and agriculture, you're going to have to hire more people locally. Once again, Americans require much higher salaries. So if a company's labor costs go up, it's not like they eat those costs for the benefit of society. These are for-profit companies, right? They're going to take those costs and cook them into their products, and the cost of the goods go up at a much higher degree than the demand comes down from less people in America because they've been deported, right? It is ultimately an inflationary trigger. And it's because of those three main policies. Granted, they haven't been enacted, right? So what ultimately does get pushed through, if they do push through policies across those three that are just less aggressive than what Trump has talked about on his campaign, we could see mortgage rates begin to lower. However, if they are implemented the way that the Trump campaign said that they want to implement them, mortgage rates could be expected to continue to increase and then maintain very, very high rates, making it less affordable and less attainable for Americans to one day own a home.
The federal government is going to change its approach to homelessness under the Trump administration, and at the top of the list is housing first. The Trump administration is going to favor a treatment-first approach. In this approach, it prioritizes stability before someone goes into housing. This is in opposition to Housing First, which says, let's quickly house someone with no restrictions and then work on all the issues related to their homelessness next. And this is not going to be the catastrophe people think it is. And here's why. Housing First relies on a resource that it doesn't have. In order for Housing First programs to work, it relies on your city having a stock of affordable housing. And for 99% of cities across the country, we don't have it. So if your plan, Housing First, relies on a resource it doesn't have, housing, your plan is broken. And this plan and this situation has been compounded by the fact that the federal government went all in on Housing First about 20 years ago, and they stopped funding shelters and transitional living programs in favor of Housing First programs. And why did they stop funding them? Because they thought that no one would need them anymore because everyone would be housed. Well, here we are. We're at a 15-year high in homelessness, and it's because we don't have affordable housing units to put folks in. And this is doubly bad because someone might have a voucher to get into a housing unit, but they're waiting for these units outside. Why? Because the federal government stopped funding shelters and transitional living programs. So this is an opportunity to rectify that. We need the infrastructure for treatment. We need the infrastructure for healthcare, for shelters, while cities build housing units. So cities, you've got 4 years to put this together. You need to build these units so if a new administration comes in, favors Housing First, the programs will actually be successful because we have the resources that we need. Thank you so much for listening.
For everyone that lives in a high cost of living area, how much has your rent gone up? Mine went from $2,100 to $3,000, and I was forced to move. And even then, I found a one-bedroom for $2,000. You see, I live in North Jersey, and unfortunately, North Jersey right now is literally the most competitive rental market in the US. So it just kind of feels like, regardless of how much money you make, you are going to overpay just to survive here. Somebody please let me know that I'm not alone here. This is getting absurd.
the rent is too damn high. The rent is too damn high. We have people across the country struggling to keep a roof over their heads. We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world outside of ancient African civilizations. Yet we cannot provide housing for every single person in our country. We have CEOs making record profits. We have corporations making record profits. We have corporate landlords suppressing and oppressing and evicting tenants without just cause while continuing to raise the rent. We call on President Biden to take executive action on this issue. We do not have a healthy democracy or a healthy society unless we take care of our tenants and our working class people who are working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week just to survive.
Bring back $900 rent. I keep telling y'all we all need to go on a rent strike. Every state all together at the same time. That's the only way they'll stop increasing rent. And what safety nets do you have in place for all of the people who are suddenly going to be unhoused? This is by no means the first time I've seen something like this, but when we're talking about irresponsible organizing, this is what we're talking about. Telling people to put their housing at risk, knowing full well that many of them have nowhere else to go, and if they get evicted, that means they are on the street, to just stop paying rent and do a rent strike without doing any of the work to provide safety and safety nets and support for those people is incredibly irresponsible. There should absolutely be rent caps. Rent should be lower. Rent is insane. The rental market needs more regulation. It's out of control. And yes, a rent strike can be a way to achieve that. But if you do not already have all of these safety nets put in place for the people who are going to be striking, it's going to fall apart incredibly quickly. And the most vulnerable people will be in even worse places than they were at the beginning. You need to have infrastructure in place for this to work.
This could lead to high mortgage rates, making home ownership more expensive. Additionally, his delegational efforts might accelerate construction, but could also create disparities in regional market activity. Higher mortgage rates and rents could increase the housing affordability crisis, potentially leading to more people facing homelessness. The combination of rising costs and limited affordable housing options could make it difficult for many to secure stable housing. Tell me what you think about this video and what is happening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video.